Two good bits of climate news from the UN General Assembly this week for us to discuss. Joe Biden, as expected, upping the United States' commitment to funding climate action in the developing world. And then, in more of a surprise move, Xi Jinping saying that China would no longer finance coal projects abroad. And with just 40 days to go before COP26 in Glasgow, we're going to be asking, is this a turning point? So, Tom, I want to ask you, first of all, about these big announcements. Let's focus in on China, because I'm going to show everybody what the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said about the issue of coal. He said accelerating the global phase-out of coal is the single most important step in keeping the Paris Agreement's key warning limit within reach. So this announcement by China, is it a key breakthrough ahead of COP26?
I don't know that it's quite a breakthrough, but it's certainly a very important development, and it more so because it was a bit unexpected. And I think that's helped to change the tone of the conversation as we run in. It was getting to be a bit gloomy. And now I think, together with the Biden announcement, this announcement, particularly because of, as the Secretary General was saying, how important coal is, I think this has lifted the tone and begun to put a little bit of momentum into it. But I think it's a bit early to say it's an actual breakthrough.
OK, so to make it a breakthrough, would China have to say we're going to make the same announcement as far as our domestic coal production is concerned? Because they rely so much on it in the country, don't they?
I think that's exactly right. As Tom showed us just a minute ago, I think that really would be a breakthrough if they were to make the commitment to phase out coal with a deadline a little bit before 2060. Then I think we'd really be looking at something you could count as a breakthrough.
OK, Mikaela, that's China. Let's talk about President Biden's announcement as well on climate finance, doubling finance to developing countries to $11 billion. I mean, climate finance has been a big sticking point. So does this give you some sense of positivity that climate justice can be achieved at COP?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to the United States, I am quite hesitant about celebrating a kind of a move from climate denial to climate delay, because what we actually need is climate action. And both climate denial and climate delay give us an unlivable future. And what we actually need is a livable future. And that means moving beyond this kind of bare minimum. They still haven't met the 100 billion target they need for this climate fund. And actually, that's not even enough, I think, if you consider how much of a part to play the United States and countries like the UK have had in the creation of this crisis and continuing to perpetuate so many emissions. I think what we actually need to hear in COP26 is have all of these nations listening to the countries that are most affected and the people who are most effective and indigenous leaders and all these people, and listening to what climate justice means for those people, rather than almost patting themselves on the back for doing what I see as almost less than the bare minimum.
And where does this leave us, do you think, then, Tom? I mean, COP21, the Paris Agreement was reached. It was deemed a huge success. Could the same happen for COP26 in November?
I think you need a kind of different measure of success. What Paris was about was really trying to put together a global agreement to deal with the problem. I think what we're now looking at are the steps we have to take to implement that agreement. And this is a really important one of those steps. And I think Mikaela is right to be a little bit cautious about what the Americans are saying about money. Okay. It's not the president of the United States that decides how much money America can give, but the US Congress. And that's a little bit less focused on climate justice than the president is. Okay. So I think that we mustn't raise our expectations too high for the COP. I think it's some real progress being made in the last few days. I think we've got to see some more in the interim period between now and the COP itself. So we need to be looking at the G20 meeting next month.
Very briefly, Mikaela, can COP26 be a success? Does this bode well?
I think that's also a difficult question, because I think considering how many nations aren't even able to make it to the COP, how many indigenous leaders, how many of the most affected people and countries aren't being able to make it there, I find it difficult to know whether this will be the success that maybe we need it to be. It seems, especially from what Boris Johnson is saying, almost applauding himself and then using whataboutism and talking about China and India rather than the UK's huge emissions and their investment in fossil fuels, that it's going to be almost like all of these countries coming together to talk about how great they are rather than actually addressing the real harm that's being caused.